Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Microsoft because there have been a lot of interesting swerves and twists with the company over the last several months. This is actually a video that I've wanted to make and have even attempted to make at least once, but there was always some new information that would come out and I would have to re-record everything, and I just got frustrated. But I think now is a good time to talk about the company because it's on a lot of people's minds right now. Especially in the last few weeks, I've seen a lot of reporting, given what Phil Spencer said about certain games at Gamescom, and I figured I would just give my thoughts on it because we've talked about Microsoft a few times on some of the podcasts or the E3 discussions. You've kind of seen my frustration with the brand over the last several years, and I kind of want to talk about what I think they need to do going forward, because they're in a really weird situation, and it's a situation that they kind of created themselves, but they need a clear path forward, and I will give my thoughts on what I think they should do. But before we get into that, I just want to go over where Microsoft has been in the games industry for maybe the last decade, because I really think that that's when things went wrong. I think some people have forgotten about the strange rollout for the Xbox One. It has been a long time since then, but that was a console that just was marketed very poorly. They wanted to do a lot of things that people did not want. They didn't ask for it, and they had to roll those changes back, probably because they realized people weren't pre-ordering the console. However, that initial issue that they had with the Xbox One lasted for most of the console's run. They never managed to recover, and that was due to exclusive titles that just were not where they needed to be. They weren't good enough, people weren't buying them, people weren't buying the console. And ever since then, there has been a pretty firm gap between them and Sony and Nintendo. They've dropped the ball with their studios. A lot of what they were putting out was either not very good or was canceled. If you go back and look at the number of Xbox One games that were publicly announced, they were shown off at trade shows and hyped, and then they were just kind of canceled unceremoniously, that reflects an extreme level of mismanagement. And I don't know if they've properly dealt with that. Their solution has been to buy as many other studios as they can. The last several years, they have been acquiring companies left and right, spending billions of dollars to purchase publishers such as Bethesda, and then even more money to purchase Activision Blizzard. There was a whole FTC lawsuit over that. It was a very disputed thing, but it has gone through at this stage. And the Xbox consoles aren't selling. I've seen estimates saying that there are 2 PlayStations that have been sold for every Xbox, but there are some other reports saying it's as much as 5. That gap is huge. It's not going away. The launch of the new Xbox, the Series X, that did not change their position. In fact, I think it made it even worse because the console launched with basically no games, and they've been slowly clawing their way to try to get back to a situation where they have exclusive titles. Because even though they bought companies left and right, that didn't really pay off, because a lot of those companies have yet to really release much, or at least release anything that was going to be a serious console seller. And in addition to that, there was Microsoft Game Pass. This was their subscription service where you could play games without buying them. Netflix for games, lots of talk about that. Some people really wanted to herald this like an amazing thing, but it doesn't seem like the growth is there. When they release numbers for the subscriptions recently, a lot of people put those numbers into question, saying that, oh, you say there's 30 million Game Pass users. Most of these people are users who already had Xbox Live, and you just kind of folded that into the same service. They're not new customers. These numbers actually suggest that your growth has stalled or plateaued. Personally, I'm not interested in a service like that. I prefer to just buy the game. I don't want to have games leaving my digital library, paying monthly. I'm not going to play enough games every month to really take advantage of a service like that. And they've increased the price. There's been some disputes about that because one of the main things that they were doing with Game Pass was you didn't even have to buy their games. It was just on Game Pass. So you could get a subscription for pretty cheap and just play the game that way, which I don't know if that was making them money, but the fact that they now have a new tier of Game Pass that is more expensive and has access to, new releases, which they're even putting Call of Duty on that, yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing to see if that works out. But that to me suggests that Game Pass for years was not working. So it's kind of a mess. Microsoft has a lot of money, but they have also spent an insane amount of money. The purchase of Activision Blizzard, that was a bigger acquisition than Microsoft has ever made before. And so now you've got the executives at Microsoft are looking at the Xbox division and they're saying, it's time to start making money. You have to pay these debts back. These sales have to amount to something. And so that is why I think a lot of strange moves are being made in the last couple of months, where now we are seeing, slowly but surely, Xbox games getting ported to systems where that was never really seen as something on the table before. Where we're seeing more ports to Nintendo Switch. We're seeing ports to PlayStation, which I don't really think was happening at all. And these are things that leave the Xbox user base probably feeling frustrated or confused, probably wondering if there's even going to be another Xbox console ever released. And Phil Spencer, people give this guy a lot of credit for allegedly saving Microsoft. Has he really? I think the last 10 years have not been great. I mean, yeah, when Don Mattrick was in charge, his strategy for the Xbox One to make it like a home entertainment device where gaming was kind of a restricted element in some ways, that didn't fly. And, he left. But I don't think that Phil has righted the ship because the last 10 years do not suggest strong growth. All the guy does is wear shirts with like Banjo-Kazooie and Battletoads and say he's a gamer and people love him. But I don't know. I don't really like listening to the guy talk, especially in some of these recent interviews. He's really just putting on a lot of double speak. And I think he needs to be honest with the audience. Especially recently at Gamescom, where he has to answer questions. People are wondering, what is the deal with this exclusivity strategy? Why are some games exclusive to Xbox? Why are some games launching on multiple platforms day one? Why are games like the Indiana Jones title launching on Xbox and then a few months later launching on PlayStation? And he can't tell the truth. He has to sidestep things. He has to say, this is a business, instead of just saying, well, our games don't really make money if they're only on Xbox, because of course he can't say that, but they need to relay a clear strategy going forward, because they've been trying everything, and it doesn't seem to be working. And we know the gaming industry is in a really strange place right now, because we've had a tremendous amount of layoffs, we have budgets that are ballooning out of control, we have unrealistic profit forecasts, there's a lot going on in the industry as a whole that needs to change. And Microsoft is certainly caught up in some of that. They have spent a lot of money in a very short span of time, and then they have to lay people off to account for that, shuttering studios that they bought only years ago. It's not a good look. They're trying everything, but there's no strategy. If you bought all these companies, and then you have to, shut some of them down, you kind of just look like a fool, like you don't know what you're doing. It's all very strange, but I'm going to try and give my thoughts on what I think Microsoft should do going forward. I had a 360 back in the day, and I think the 360 was a pretty solid console, but I have not owned an Xbox since, and there have been many reasons for that. I can't see myself buying one, so this is partially based on what I would like to see, but it's also based on what I think they need to do financially to survive. So let's start with the elephant in the room, and that would be the Xbox game console itself. There is a part of me that thinks Microsoft should stop. They should stop making Xboxes as a whole. If they're really selling that poorly compared to their competitors, you just don't have enough of the market. It's just not going to work. The games aren't going to do as well as they need to, and you're not making much money. I think at the very least, Microsoft needs to discontinue the Xbox Series S, because it is pretty obvious at this point that that console, which is essentially a less powerful Xbox Series X, is holding back the development of games. There have been many instances where companies have cited issues porting to the Xbox because of the Series S. Baldur's Gate 3 was famously delayed for about 6 months because of these issues. There have been other titles where the game consoles don't really launch with the performance they were initially advertised to have because of Series S. It had to be patched in later. There have been other reports out there from independent developers, third-party developers, that making a game and then having to optimize it for Series S is a huge pain in the ass. And Microsoft brags about having the most powerful consoles ever, but they go out of their way to make a weaker console that your games have to work for. It doesn't make any sense. So at the very least, I would say the S has to go if you want to deliver on the products, the games. That said, I don't know the breakdown of sales. I know the Series S is cheaper, maybe it's selling better. Now, if Microsoft is going to make a new console completely, which could certainly happen, it's been discussed. There have been leaked reports of that. I don't know what it should be. I have some ideas. My biggest issue with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series S is that there was nothing new about them. They did not really iterate in any capacity. It's just the same thing we've had for the last 10 years. Again, what I would suggest Microsoft try to do for their next Xbox is make it a game console, but also make it kind of like a hybrid gaming PC. Make it something you can use in your living room where you can comfortably PC game without being at a desk or whatever, but also have that console experience. Now, this could be kind of like a Steam Deck, although I don't think this necessarily needs to be portable. But I think that with an appropriate level of polish, this could be a better user experience than the Steam Deck. You know, I've been around Steam Decks, and it's really not fun to watch people have to fiddle with controllers and system settings for like 15 minutes before even being able to play a game. I don't really enjoy that. But I think if it had a Microsoft level of polish, that would be a unique way of doing it. You could have your library that you play on computer. It all works on this as well. I don't know. That's just an idea. But if they don't have something that's going to stand out, if it's just going to be more of the same, I think they need to stop. Because they're wasting money. They're wasting everyone's time. And there wouldn't be any shame in this. And I say that sincerely. There should be no shame in Microsoft choosing to not make Xboxes anymore. They are very clearly a software company now because they own a tremendous amount of game development studios. And there are companies like Sega that are now thriving since leaving behind the hardware market. I think that Microsoft has made memories for people. There are franchises that they created 15 plus years ago that there are still people passionate about. And those should be able to stand the test of time. And I think they have the potential to do well regardless of what hardware you're playing them on. That's what I think Microsoft needs to focus on going forward. Now, moving on to Game Pass. This is kind of hard to say what they should do with it. Because we know that this Call of Duty tier, that's what some people are calling it. We know that is something scheduled to come out. Well, I guess it might already be available, but it doesn't matter until games like Call of Duty are on it. And maybe there can be some metrics or financial data as far as how many people signed up for this tier just to play Call of Duty instead of buying the game. Does that matter? How does that affect the financials? We don't really know. There are other companies like EA and Ubisoft who have subscription services. I'm not terribly familiar with how they work. I know Sony also kind of does this with PlayStation Plus. There are companies dabbling in this area, and Microsoft is in the field as well. They've put a lot of money into cloud gaming. This stuff could matter to people. So I'm not saying Game Pass has to go away, but I think it's in the same situation as the games themselves. I think Game Pass needs to be available to more people. So what I would suggest is that Game Pass needs to become a service that is available on other consoles, in the same way that EA Play is, for example. It might be an appealing option for some people. If you just have this service that you can pull from, you haven't bought these games, you can play them across any game system that you own where they're compatible or whatever. I think there would be something to that, if the library was big enough, if it was appealing enough. That could have merit to certain people. I don't know if it would matter to me, because I haven't really engaged in that, but that's what I do know. Because if I want to do Game Pass, I have to do it on the computer. I don't know if you have access to the same stuff you would have on an Xbox, so why not make that available on any console? That's what I think should happen. And of course, this is the big one, the games. The exclusive games, more accurately. There's really just no easy way to say this. And they have to be scaled back. That's what seems to be happening, but they're not making it clear. So here's what I'm proposing. Games that are made under the Xbox Game Studios brand, or at least they have some kind of sticker on the cover that indicates that it's a true Xbox game, these are what should be considered exclusive. That way there will not be confusion regarding why some games are multi-platform to start and some aren't. Furthermore, if you're going to have these games be exclusive to Xbox, based on the current data, they need to leave Xbox after a certain point. So what I think needs to happen is the majority of games made under the Bethesda label, under the Activision Blizzard label, stuff like that, that stuff is multi-platform day one. There is no reason to wait. There is no reason to delay. You are not moving consoles, and you never will at this rate. But games that have that special Microsoft sticker to cater to your fan base, okay, you can keep those for about 6 months, we'll say. Those are exclusive to Xbox for 6 months, but of course they'll probably be on PC day one. Maybe they'll even be on Game Pass day one. I think that would be a decent compromise, as long as you're making Xboxes. If you're not, you're going to have to change your strategy. But I think they really need to be honest about this exclusive game situation, because it's incredibly vague, and it doesn't really make sense, and a lot of the franchises in question are kind of in limbo anyway. It just seems to be kind of a slow death, a spiral, if you will, for Microsoft, because companies like this, they don't just close up overnight. It's a long way down, and they have a lot of money still. So it's not like Microsoft's going to close, but they put a target on their back when they made all those acquisitions. They need to make money, and they need to make it fast. We need a concrete plan. I've proposed some ideas. Phil Spencer needs to do the same. And if he's not going to do that, he should retire. And maybe there needs to be someone else who can take up stead and has a strong vision of what's going to work for Microsoft, because things are not the way they were 10 years ago. He had his shot. It hasn't worked. They talk all the time about the Xbox community and how important that is. What community? I barely know anyone who even has an Xbox anymore. One of the only people who I know who bought one did it while he was intoxicated and has often told me that he regrets the purchase. You know, that's just my experience. People are moving away from it. I moved away from the Xbox because I knew it was very obvious that there were a lot of games from Japan and other places that were not even going to be released on the platform, and I didn't want it to be limited that way. And that still happens today to some degree, where Xbox ports tend to come out later. It's a secondary market for a lot of people. And anyone who is still on that device, anyone who's still using an Xbox, this community that Phil caters to, I've seen on the internet the way these people talk. They're circling the drain. They're angry. They're negative. This is what it looks like when a community is dying. I guess my advice to those people, I understand you're frustrated, you spent money, you invested money, and you feel like you've wasted it. If you're passionate about the games, if you're passionate about the art, you will follow them. That's what I will do. I follow the art. If there's something that I really want to experience, really want to play, I will do my best to get in there. However, I have to. I don't really want to let money get in the way. That doesn't mean I spend money frivolously, because I don't. Instead of just sitting on my island and being mad at what's happening on the rest of the world, you should kind of stick your head in there and experience it. Don't just act like the grass is greener where you are, because you're not watering the grass, goddammit. We can all see that from where we are. That said, I really do hope that whatever happens with Microsoft, if the consoles go away, I'm hoping that users can keep their library. And maybe that's why Game Pass will matter. Just some way of keeping your library even if you're on a new device. And that's kind of difficult. That means that Microsoft is going to have to make a lot of these legacy titles playable on new systems, which probably won't happen, but at least for the first-party Microsoft stuff, they should find a way to make that work. You don't want to piss off what's left of your core fan base. But at the same time, they could make a lot more money by selling to users elsewhere. I mean, what's better? These games just fading away? These franchises disappearing? Or finding new life with a different audience? What are your thoughts on Xbox and Microsoft? What do you think needs to happen? What do you think will happen? Please let me know in the comments. Hope you're having a great day out there, whatever games you're playing on, whatever devices you're playing. I hope we can all just have a good time. And I certainly hope that because of bad economic decisions, more people don't have to lose their jobs. Either way, I'll see you later.